Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C., and I am standing in beautiful Ward 6 in the heart of Washington, where about 85, 90,000 people live. Part of the 712,000 people who live and work and raise families and pay their taxes in Washington, D.C. I'm joined today by members of my administration: Robert Conti, the Chief of the Metropolitan Police Department; Chris Rodriguez, Director of the District's Homeland Security Agency; and Dr. Roger Mitchell, the Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice. I'm also joined by John Falchicchio, the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, and Elliot Ferguson, who is the CEO and President of Destination DC. I'm also joined today by members of the Council of the District of Columbia: Charles Allen, who is our host council member, the council member for Ward 6, and Council Member Brooke Pinto, the council member for Ward 2. I want to just have a quick check-in with everyone ahead of tomorrow's historic inauguration. And we also want to talk about what's in the future for our beautiful city. And that's why I asked Elliot Ferguson to join us here today, because he spends every day thinking about our destination and why people want to come visit Washington, D.C. We are just 24 hours away from welcoming President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Let's give them a big round of applause. And I know many people are disappointed, as I am, that we have to enjoy the inauguration. We've asked our fellow Americans to join the inauguration from home and watch the wonderful virtual events that the president-elect's inauguration committee has planned. We know certainly that there is a lot to celebrate, and we know that people are excited to begin this new chapter. But for the health and safety of our country, people are making the right choice to stay at home and watch the events virtually. Here in Washington, D.C., we've made a lot of friends around the country this past year. We felt the support of Americans nationwide on a number of occasions. We know that today more people than ever before have joined us in our fight for D.C. statehood. More people than ever before understand the injustice of disenfranchising 712,000 tax-paying Americans. They understand, too, why it needs to be fixed and why it needs to be fixed now. And they get that the only way to ensure that Washingtonians have full access to our democracy is through statehood. So to our friends across the country, thank you for your support. And my hope is that you will join us in pushing for it. And it is also my hope that you will join us right here in Washington, D.C. To celebrate. And we hope that our new president and new vice president will rethink some of the events that are traditional for this time of year, like a parade, like balls and celebrations, like parties at various homes across the District of Columbia, at our restaurants. We hope that you and they will come back to Washington, D.C. To celebrate the 4th of July and celebrate Labor Day. And we will be able to have somewhat different, but still celebrations of our new administration. What do you think about that idea? We have been through a lot together in this country, and while we've had some dark days over the past year, we've also witnessed how resilient we are as a people. Americans still deserve to celebrate the incoming administration as well as the enduring spirit of our democracy. We, of course, also welcome the opportunity to show our fellow Americans the 63 square miles that lie outside the security perimeter that they're seeing on the news. We want people to see our neighborhoods where we raise our families, where we have parks and playgrounds and parades and festivals, where we have world-class restaurants, theaters, and music venues. We want Americans to see the real DC, the neighborhoods like the one we're standing in right now. Yes, in the shadow of the Capitol, but all Washington, DC. Yesterday, I was also heartened to see Washingtonians posting photos of their neighborhoods on social media and tagging them with "We Are DC." It is a much needed reminder to the world that our city has so much to offer outside of the federal enclave. And actually, all of these neighborhoods are what will become the 51st state of Washington, D.C. So keep sharing those photos. Make sure that you're signed up for inauguration alerts. Remember that if you see something unusual, say something. And I'm glad that you've been doing that over the last several days, and our agencies have been following up on every last concern. The eyes of the world are on D.C. right now, and we're going to continue to show everyone why Washington, D.C. is the greatest city in the world and soon to be the 51st state. So please join me in welcoming your council member, Charles Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Charles Allen. I'm the Ward 6 council member. And two quick things I want to talk about today. One is I do want to reassure all of our neighbors and DC residents about the steps being taken. I'm on almost a regular contact with Chief Conti, Chief Donnelly from the fire department, with Director Rodriguez from HSEMA, Dr. Mitchell, and of course our mayor. And I'm feeling confident about the steps our city is taking to make sure that at the end of the day, we're keeping our residents and keeping our city safe. There's a lot of things that we may not be able to control for, but for the things that we are, I've been impressed with the way in which our city has mobilized and is working hard, and I want residents to know that. Now, of course, in Ward 6, we are no stranger to the federal Capitol complex. They may be pictures and symbols of American democracy to the rest of the country, but for us, they're in our backyard. There's a tree in the Supreme Court that my daughter likes to read a book under. These are places that are a part of our vibrant community, and so we feel a little bit of a way when we see it under assault. And it's something that we feel very strongly about. What we know, of course, as the mayor's talked about, is that we deserve to have a voice in the halls of that building more so than ever. And the fight for DC statehood could not be stronger and more important and more necessary right now than at any other time, I think, in our country's history. In addition to that, of course, as the mayor said, we're in the middle of a neighborhood. This weekend I swung by, Easter Market was alive. It was full of people and residents doing their business, artists and vendors selling their wares, and part of just an exciting and vibrant community. So we want to make sure that residents know to be able to get out, to be able to help support their local businesses, to help make sure our community is alive and vibrant. And we know that as we get through the next several days and then we start the unwinding of what we have seen, we know our communities are going to be strong, and we know that we want people to be out supporting our businesses and all the great things that our community has to offer. So thank you, Ms. Mayor, for the hard work that's going into this to be successful tomorrow. And I'm proud of what's going to take place and proud of the way that our city is really pulling together. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, and thanks for all the great work you're doing. I think in the course of our COVID modified operations, we've opened some new playgrounds and have even more interesting things for Ward 6 neighbors to enjoy, and we're going to keep on doing that. We also wanted to invite Councilmember Pinto, whose Ward 2, encompasses a good part of the affected areas around the White House and the National Mall. Councilmember Pinto.
Thank you. I'm Brooke Pinto, council member representing Ward 2 on the DC Council. I want to thank Mayor Bowser and Chief Conti for your leadership during these extraordinarily challenging times, and echo the sentiment of during this week to stay home, watch the inauguration virtually. I know that we can get through this time together. Ward 2 encompasses much of the downtown area and the federal buildings that are affected by the closures. And I'm so grateful to the resiliency of our community, for our businesses, folks like Mike Brand at the Penn Quarter Sports Tavern and Jose Andres, who have fed thousands of our troops during this time with meals. And our residents who have opened up their backyard to ensure that we have a safe, peaceful transition of power. I think, as has been mentioned, this time has shown our country how indicative and clear it is that we need statehood for the District of Columbia. So we are looking forward to welcoming President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris to our city. And I'm so grateful that they have called on all of us to guide us, to call on our better angels and restore civility and the norms that make our democracy so great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And thanks for mentioning our great restaurants who are feeding troops now. We've been joined by Chef Spike Mendelson. Let's give Chef Spike a big round of applause. Chef Spike also got looped into chairing our Food Policy Council, and he's putting those policies into action. So thank you, Chef Spike. I mentioned Elliot Ferguson earlier, and I have to say it's an unusual position as a mayor to be in, to invite people not to come to your city right now. And it's not something that I would say lightly at all. But I want everybody to know, all of our visitors, hotels, restaurants, and everybody who loves Washington like we do, to know that Destination DC is planning right now to make your next trip your most special trip. Elliot, please come up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I could not have put it better myself in terms of how amazing Washington, D.C. is as a destination. You know, I've lived in Washington for 19 years. I moved here right after 9/11. So I've dealt with and promoted Washington through a lot of instances where, as perhaps the global community might say, well, maybe I won't come to Washington because of something that's happening in the city, such as 9/11 and all the other things we've dealt with. I think right now the mayor's message is on point. We've got to focus on safety with the pandemic. We have to focus on, of course, having a safe day tomorrow. So even though the message is tied to not coming to Washington right now, there are reasons why we want to make sure that individuals understand the importance of coming back to Washington as a destination. One thing for sure, we know that every 4 years we normally see an economic impact of $1 billion tied to individuals coming to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. And that's not going to happen this year. We're happy that we've got the 25,000 troops in the city to make sure that we're safe. And we love for the fact that people come to Washington to exercise their First Amendment right. As a matter of fact, protest tourism, safe protest tourism, is something in which we're focusing on, thanks to the mayor, Black Lives Matter Plaza, and all the other things that are tied to our city. Washington is a great destination. Economic development tied to tourism is extremely important. As we look at the 80,000 people that work in this industry, the $8 billion that are generated on an annual basis, nearly $900 million in taxes that, as a Washington resident, we all have a chance to benefit from. I have the pleasure of living in the ward that we're in now, just a few blocks from here, and I moved here simply because I enjoy Ward 6 in Capitol Hill. It's a great destination, and it's a reason why we want individuals to want to come to Washington on a regular basis. Now, monuments, memorials, and museums and the federal experience, as the mayor referenced, is only a part of the reason as to why we want folks to visit. Our neighborhoods are amazing, the history, the architecture, as the mayor referenced, all the events and activities, sporting events, nightlife, our great restaurants that were referenced earlier. These are the things that we promote on a regular basis. So at the proper time, because we still have to focus on a pandemic that's affecting the international industry, we will be focusing on bringing folks back to Washington. We know that over 50 million people live within 250 miles of Washington, D.C. So we're going to focus on all those amazing things that Councilmember Pinto referenced in Ward 2. But we're also going to talk about all the ways in which you can enjoy Washington and still socially distance by visiting our neighborhoods, and how safe Washington is, even though the perception might be of concern to those that are looking. So as the mayor referenced, our goal is to get back out there with our 4 international offices and our amazing team here working with Events DC, the Hotel Association, and the Restaurant Association, and of course our mayor, to promote Washington, D.C. as a world-class destination. So stay tuned as we do that very soon. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, we'll take some questions. Questions, Sam?
Bridges, that the inbound bridges that would be closed, and those that we understand Metropolitan Police put out. Can we get some explanation there, please?
Sure. Why don't I turn to Chris Rodriguez and Chief Conti?
Hi, Sam. Thanks for the question. So the original release that was put out by the Secret Service, as you know, was very restrictive, especially impacting residents in the District of Columbia. When you look at the bridges that were within the D.C. Footprint, Sousa Bridge, and 11th Street Bridge, South Capitol Street Bridge, all those bridges were impacted. So what we really tried to work out in an effort to make things more accessible for our D.C. residents is to at least pare down those bridges to one single lane of traffic coming in, so that residents could traverse across the city. And still there's some impact there, but we still have the ability to shut those bridges off if we need to.
So they're slowed down, but they're not closed.
That's correct.
Yes, Stephanie.
Morning by 15th and Independence for firearms charges. It was a vehicle checkpoint. I understand DC Police did not make those arrests, but can you talk about the perimeter, the security perimeter, where you're seeing these arrests being made, and is this working the way that you all want it to?
Okay, so Stephanie is asking a question about 2 specific arrests, and then the security perimeter in general.
Thank you for the question, Stephanie. So the arrest was made this morning. It was of the United States Secret Service made the arrest. It was of a bus driver. So that arrest was handled totally by them. And then the perimeter as well, as you mentioned, it's a huge perimeter, obviously. So there's MPD, federal law enforcement agencies, as well as Secret Service manning those perimeters throughout our city. And we're working collaboratively with them to try to make sure that everything continues to be safe for our residents and those that are involved in the inaugural festivities.
That, sir. Can you kind of go over, though, because there's 2 layers of perimeter here, and
right.
So for the folks who are seeing it saying, oh my God, this is happening so close, can you just kind of describe like where these incidents are happening and how that's working to what you have all planned? Where these incidents are happening, where these arrests are
Yeah,
made.
so the arrests are taking place primarily at locations where there are checkpoints. Again, we're sweeping vehicles, we're checking vehicles. There are people who have to go through certain security protocols in order to gain access to the perimeter, to the inner perimeter. There's a green line that we talk about and a red line that we talk about. At those locations, they are encountering law enforcement personnel, and as a result of some of the interactions, we've made a few arrests.
Chief, what happens if the perimeters work and groups show up and can't make it in, and then they find themselves coming out into neighborhoods like this? The closest available soft targets would be neighborhoods that don't see any military presence and are just left to MPD to protect.
Thank you for that question, Mark. We've planned for that. We want to make sure that our communities are not forgotten in our security posture. So for every police district, throughout all 8 wards in the city, we have a contingency plan for that. We're fully staffed. Members are working 12-hour shifts, and we have sufficient resources to cover what we need to cover.
And the mayor's reaction. Today, the Associated Press is reporting that 2 members of the National Guard have been removed from their security details here in Inauguration because they were found to have ties to fringe militia groups. I'm just wondering if you know if it goes beyond those 2 members, if we should expect more members to have similar circumstances, and just what are your thoughts that now this vetting process has uncovered at least 2 members that they found problematic?
Okay, thank you for the question, Mark. So I'm only aware of those two members, and just a very short answer to that is that the vetting process obviously is working.
I would like to follow up on that. Do you have confidence in the National Guard, Mayor Bowser, who are defending our city right now?
We've called on the National Guard, Julie, as you know. The DC, I won't go into my rant about the DC National Guard not really being the DC National Guard, but the President's Guard and all of that. But maybe I will. So you know that the district's guard, it doesn't report to the mayor and council. The district's guard goes up through the Army to the President of the United States. So they are not accountable to us, which is part of which is a big issue for us. Because when they are accountable to us, we know about the leadership, we know about their, completely know about their operations, and we know that they answer to us and not the President of the United States, whoever the President of the United States is. And so when you have guardsmen and women coming from all over the country at this time, I do think that it is prudent to make sure that they are being vetted, and that anybody who cannot pledge allegiance to their mission and may be pulled by other views needs not only to be removed from this duty, they need to be removed from the Guard.
Everyone across the country to watch the inauguration from home tomorrow. Can you tell us about your plans for how you're going to spend the day and watch the inauguration?
I will be representing the district on the podium, watching or on the grounds. Actually, I don't know exactly where I'm going to be sitting, but I will be on the Capitol grounds. Yes, the question here, Mitch.
Yeah, I have a vaccine-related question.
Okay.
So the DC Health Director Nesbitt was resisting allocating vaccine.
Can you speak up, please?
Dr. Nesbitt had resisted allocating vaccine doses by ward previously, but DC Health is now doing that. I guess I'm wondering what changed in that calculation.
I'm not gonna kind of agree with your characterization because I wasn't there for that whole conversation or any of the conversation actually. But as you know, we implemented a early registration for wards that had been underrepresented in the vaccination registrations, but also over impacted by COVID. And then a couple of days later, opened up the remaining reservations for the entire city. And let me just say, it's pretty obvious that COVID has an uneven impact in the district, both in terms of the incidence of COVID and people who died from COVID. And we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that the people who need it most have access to it. But let's be real clear. We're talking about the release of 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, up to 8,000 appointments when our need is much greater. So as long as we are working in this very intense period of scarcity over the vaccine, we know that people who need and want the vaccine won't be able to get it. So almost every system is imperfect until we have enough vaccine.
Vaccine distribution along the lines of like who's most impacted as opposed to just opening the appointments up district-wide?
Well, that's been kind of the strategy all along, like starting with healthcare workers, moving to people, elderly folks. We will have some subsets of essential workers, I think, that get rolled out next. So that's always been the strategy of people who've been impacted most and whose types of work and jobs are critical to the COVID response and the functioning of society.
As well.
Yeah.
So MPD is investigating the Capitol police officer who shot and killed a person in the Capitol a few weeks ago. Can you give us an update on that investigation and whether it will be made public when it's completed?
Yeah, so the MPD will continue our investigation as we always do for law enforcement agencies that are involved in shootings. Our findings will be taken over to the United States Attorney's Office for their consideration, and then once that's done, it comes back to us, and then we'll loop in Capitol Police for any administrative issues that will follow that. No, obviously it's not completed. There's tons of video, there's tons of interviews that are underway, as we go about this, and it'll be a while. As you know, police investigations, especially when you're talking about the loss of life involved, we're very meticulous about those investigations. The investigations, what goes over to the United States Attorney's Office, once we turn it over and it becomes an administrative matter, at that point, I think there's some public visibility there.
Okay, Mark.
Recently, I mean,
Yes.
Can you tell us when, and can you tell us anything about that conversation? And
Generally, I can say to you, Mark, that I spoke to him after the events of January the 6th, and we spoke about a number of things related to the inauguration.
request for the $750 million DC was shorted in the stimulus plan.
I answered you. We spoke. I'm not going to talk about the details of the conversation, as I never do, but we spoke about a number of the things related to the inauguration. I can say, and I don't think he would mind me saying this. He said something to the effect like, "Kid, I've always been there with you. I've always supported statehood." Yes. Right? That's what he said.
Elizabeth O'Gorick, the Hill Rag. I have a question first about vaccines, and then about security. First,
Can you introduce yourself?
Elizabeth O'Gorick, the Hill Rag, the very local
Hi,
paper.
Elizabeth.
Hi. First,
My name's Elizabeth too, so I'll remember that.
First, a question about vaccines. How come the city didn't create a central registry by phase and then contact patients to get the vaccine, as opposed to having them call in what amounts to, for some people, kind of a lottery?
Well, that would have been kind of a lottery too, wouldn't it? Because until we have enough, there has to be some way to pick people out.
Second question about security. Do you have a sense of how long these security measures will be in place? And will you ask the federal government for compensation for the businesses that are forced to close due to these security
Well,
measures?
we're investigating that now, Elizabeth. That's a great question. Hers was two parts. How long will we have these amped up security? And if there's any relief for businesses who have been impacted. So we're looking into that now. Deputy Mayor Fachicchio and HCMA. As you know, I requested a pre-disaster declaration that was approved, and we're investigating if there's any additional federal payments to businesses that can be made through that process. So we're starting that, and we will get back to you. Today, I plan to talk to our Congresswoman and my team about how we approach a new security posture in the district. Obviously, we don't want fences and armed troops in our city any longer than they need to be. But at the same time, we need to be smart about how we approach this new posture. So I've tasked DCHCMA with doing some research for us. Unfortunately, we've had in our country other incidents of terrorism, both foreign and domestic, and we want to look to see what have been the best approaches to hardening without looking like we're hardening our security. Yes.
With Telemundo. My question is for Director Rodriguez.
What's your name again?
Alberto with Telemundo.
Okay, Alberto.
My question is for Director
Go
Rodriguez.
ahead.
We were just wondering if is there any indication that there are threats to other buildings here in DC? Obviously, the Capitol is fortified. Are there any threats, any indication to other buildings in the district?
Thank you. Director? Let me repeat the questions. Are there any other specific threats to buildings outside of the federal enclave?
Well, thanks for the question. And along with Metropolitan Police Department and Chief Conti and his team, we have daily briefings with the FBI and the Secret Service. It was something that Mayor Bowser requested after the 6th. And at this time, we don't have any specific or credible threats to buildings or facilities outside of the federal enclave.
Okay, I'll take one last round, and then I'll take some community questions, okay? Any press questions? Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Mrs. Mayor and staff. My name is Lanita Avery. My concern, first of all, is to Chief Conti. Welcome. My concern is the police officers.
Yes, ma'am.
To be trained. Are they going to retrain them mentally and physically where they can handle situations and get back in shape? Also, the senior citizens, I'm very concerned about them as well as children.
I got it.
Safety.
All right, thank you, Chief. That's a note that we need to focus on physical and mental health, which the Chief in all of this has reminded me, not just for our community, which is under a lot of anxiety due to COVID, but our police officers are as well. And he's very focused on how to make sure all of our police officers have access to the help that they need. And that they ask for that help. Okay, yes, Stephanie.
Is there any more information that your office has on the vetting process for National Guard members? If that is not completed in time, will those members be told to sit out, or will they be allowed to work inauguration security? And then a follow-up question for Events DC. If
Sure.
That's okay.
So the first question was, if a person isn't vetted, will they be here or not? And Chris, I think you can speak to that process. And then Elliot, there's a question for you.
Thanks for the question, Stephanie. So a lot of the vetting and the background investigations that happen through the National Guard occur when they become members. And so that vetting can take place while they're in their home states. Before they deploy, and not speaking to specific investigations, is that those questions would have to be referred to the National Guard and the FBI, but that's our understanding of the process.
Elliot?
Question after you is, what kind of battle you're up against? Because with the world looking at DC, while there are many amazing neighborhoods and places, many have been seen rioting, businesses boarding up over and over again, places set on fire, churches, banners burned, and now militarization here in the capital. What kind of battle are you up against to bring back democracy and bring back business?
Okay, I think your question is what type of circumstances am I up against in terms of promoting DC based on what the global community is seeing on the news. I think the reality is that, as a world-class destination, we're not the first major city that has unfortunately had circumstances similar to what we're dealing with now. I think there are concerns from a global perspective and domestic perspective in terms of what they're seeing, and those are rightfully so concerns that these individuals might have about what's happening in Washington. I think we're looking at it through a long-term perspective. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, tourism to Washington has really been compromised already. So as we're looking at recovery from an international perspective, which is usually the audience that normally looks at something that's happening like right now and shows more concern about travel, we'll have an opportunity to rebound, if you will, simply because with the new administration, with Chief Conti, with our mayor and others making safety and security a priority, that will be extremely important as we're promoting DC as a destination. The other reality too is that you're seeing similar things happen in other state capitals around the U.S., which is a reason for concern. And those are the comments that we're getting from our offices. I think that this has happened in other global cities. So unfortunately, there is a precedent for this. The question is what happens next? And I think that's what we're going to be focusing on as we get back to normal in terms of getting beyond the pandemic and getting beyond what's happening in the city now with the inauguration. So we're extremely optimistic. I also happen to chair the U.S. Travel Association, and in that capacity, we focus on safety, security, and other measures tied to travel to the U.S. on a regular basis. So these are things in which we're focusing on right now.
Do you anticipate ending the indoor dining pause on January 22nd still?
I don't have anything to announce about that today, Mitch. Okay, we'll take two more, Mark, and then Elizabeth.
I'm wondering if you have any information. We heard word about a body found near Fletcher's Boathouse today. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, it appears that it was a homeless individual, about 60 years of age, possibly died of natural causes. Obviously, that has to be investigated, but right now it does not appear any foul play or anything like that is involved.
Was he in the water, or was he in the land, in the woods, or do you know anything about?
I'm told that he had an encampment near the water.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Elizabeth?
People arrested or charged in the Capitol riots been charged with crimes in DC?
Any, Chief, the question was, were any of the rioters charged with DC crimes, local DC crimes?
No, the majority of these folks that are being arrested are charged at the federal level, so they're in district court.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Isn't Ward 6 beautiful?
We now return to our previously scheduled program, already in progress.
My name is Dr. Unique Morris Hughes, and I'm the Director of the Department of Employment Services. And today I'll be sharing instructions on how to file an unemployment insurance claim with the District of Columbia. District employees